What if death isn't final anymore? With modern medicine rewriting our limits, today we explore one bold question. Can we actually cure death? For most of human existence, death was the only absolute certainty, an immutable wall dividing everything we know from everything we fear. But for the first time in history, that wall has begun to crack. The idea of curing death once sounded like pure fantasy, something belonging to myths, religions, or sci-fi movies where immortality was either a blessing or a curse. Yet here we are, living in an era where technology has not only extended human life but has begun to challenge the mechanisms of dying itself. What used to be a dream is quickly becoming a scientific hypothesis. Maybe death is not a singular event, but a biological process, one that might be postponed, manipulated, or even reversed. Today, researchers do not see death as the end but as a spectrum of deteriorating functions. The human body is made of trillions of cells, each following chemical rules that can be modified. Organ failure doesn't happen in an instant. It unfolds in stages, leaving behind windows of opportunity that scientists are learning to exploit. With genetic editing, cellular regeneration, nanomedicine, and advanced organ support, the boundary between life and death is beginning to blur in ways unimaginable even a century ago. The fantasy is evolving into a scientific ambition. If aging is a disease, then death may be its final symptom, meaning that one day we might treat it the way we now treat infections or heart attacks. The boldest thinkers in biotechnology argue that dying isn't a mystical moment but a biological failure state. And failures can be repaired. It raises a provocative thought. If we can extend life indefinitely, are we approaching a future where death is optional? The fantasy that once belonged to legends is now moving toward the laboratory, forcing us to question everything we believe about the limits of human existence. The definition of death has never been fixed. It has shifted constantly as science evolved. In ancient civilizations, death was declared when the breath left the body or when the skin turned cold. For centuries, the absence of a pulse was enough to bury someone. Countless people were even mispronounced dead, only to awaken hours later, leading to historical panic and myths of premature burials. What humanity considered the moment of death depended more on limited tools than true biological understanding. Then came the stethoscope, which transformed the way physicians recognized cardiac silence. Later, the discovery of electrical activity in the brain completely reshaped our criteria. Suddenly, a person without a heartbeat could still be resuscitated, but a person without brain function was declared legally dead. Yet even brain death is debated today, especially as new technology reveals surprising cases of delayed recovery or persistent microactivity in supposedly dead neurons. Modern medicine has stretched the boundary further with defibrillators, organ support machines, artificial ventilation, and extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, ECMO. People who would have been unquestionably dead 50 years ago are now brought back with increasingly sophisticated techniques. Death is no longer a single event but a fluid line that moves depending on what tools we can use to push it back. This creates an unsettling question. If better technology consistently redefines death, then have we ever truly understood what it means to die? Tomorrow's advances may shift the goalposts yet again. Just as past societies believed death was the final loss of breath, our own definition may someday be viewed as primitive. The parameters of death are not permanent, they are expanding. And they suggest something groundbreaking. The final boundary of life may not be final at all. Cardiac arrest is often portrayed as the body's ultimate shutdown. The heart stops, blood flow ceases, oxygen starves every organ. For most of history, that was the end of the story. But today, we know something extraordinary. The moment the heart stops is not the moment a person dies. Instead, it marks the beginning of a biological countdown, a race against time where modern medicine can still intervene. When the heart stops beating, consciousness fades within seconds, yet the brain cells do not instantly die. They begin a slow, desperate struggle to stay alive, drawing on whatever oxygen and glucose remain. This window, lasting minutes or sometimes longer, is where the miracle of modern resuscitation operates. Defibrillation can shock the heart back into rhythm. CPR can keep oxygen circulating. Drugs can reopen arteries, and advanced methods like ECMO can temporarily replace the heart and lungs entirely. What makes cardiac arrest astonishing is that people who technically have no pulse, no breathing, and no signs of life can still return, sometimes with memories, sometimes with full neurological function. Death becomes reversible, at least for a limited time, and research shows that awareness can persist for several minutes after the heart stops, indicating that the mind may remain active longer than we believed. This forces us to rethink our assumptions. Cardiac arrest isn't a final shutdown. It's a critical moment where the body's systems teeter between recoverability and irreversible damage. Each year, science pushes this threshold further. In some cases, people are revived after 30, 40, even 60 minutes of technical death, especially when cooling technology delays brain deterioration. The line between life and death becomes not only scientific but negotiable. Cardiac arrest, once the gatekeeper to the afterlife, now appears more like a temporary malfunction, one we are learning to fix. Determining life seems straightforward, until you try to define it with precision. Is someone alive because their heart beats? Because their neurons fire? Because they can think, feel, or respond? Modern medicine has taught us that life is not a single signal but a constellation of processes. The true challenge is not identifying life, but recognizing when it has stopped. A beating heart isn't enough. Machines can artificially maintain circulation. Breathing isn't enough either. Ventilators can move air indefinitely. Even electrical activity in the brain can linger after severe trauma. So what, then, is the moment where a person ceases to be a living individual? Today, we rely on brain death as the clinical endpoint, but emerging research complicates this concept. Experimental studies show that brain cells can remain viable for hours after oxygen loss. Some animal studies even demonstrate partial restoration of neural activity long after death should have been irreversible. These findings are unsettling and revolutionary. They suggest that our current definition of life is based not on absolute biological truth, but on the limits of our technology. The more we understand consciousness, the more ambiguous the edge of life becomes. Is life a physical process, a subjective experience, a chemical structure that can be restarted? Philosophers wonder if consciousness is binary or gradual. Scientists describe life as a self-organizing process that may persist in hidden ways even when outward signs disappear. As these questions intensify, the act of declaring someone dead becomes a scientific decision rather than a biological certainty. And if we cannot perfectly define where life ends, how can we state with confidence that death is irreversible? Perhaps the true definition of being alive is simply this: the body still holds potential. And potential, in the age of advanced medicine, might be enough. Cryogenics, the extreme cooling of biological tissue, may represent humanity's most radical attempt to cure death before it happens. While it sounds like science fiction, the underlying logic is simple. If you cannot save someone today, preserve them long enough for future technology to succeed. Cryonics doesn't aim to resurrect the dead. It aims to prevent the final destruction of cells, locking the body in a state of suspended animation. When cooled to extremely low temperatures, biochemical reactions slow to a near halt. This gives cells an extended pause, preventing decay. Modern cryonics uses vitrification, a process that replaces water inside cells with specialized cryoprotectants, preventing ice crystals from forming and destroying delicate structures. The goal is to preserve not just organs, but the intricate architecture of the brain where memories, identity, and consciousness reside. To skeptics, cryonics is wishful thinking. But to many scientists, it is a long bet on future breakthroughs. Already, we have revived frozen embryos, preserved organs for extended periods, and even brought certain animals back from frozen states. Research into tissue regeneration, nanomedicine, and brain mapping is advancing rapidly. If one day we can repair cellular damage, regrow tissues, or restore neural pathways, then preserved individuals might theoretically be revived with their memories intact. Cryogenics reframes death not as the end, but as a temporary defeat, a challenge deferred to a more advanced future. It represents humanity's refusal to accept biological limits. The idea is bold. As long as the brain's structure remains intact, the person may not be truly gone. They are simply waiting for a cure that hasn't been invented yet. In a world where medicine constantly expands the boundaries of the possible, cryogenics stands as the most daring frontier, a bridge between today's mortality and tomorrow's potential immortality.